Hello from Hollywood. My name is Anthony Boyer. I've been a talent agent in Los Angeles and New York for the last 15 years.
And I'm Jess Canty, and I'm a talent manager here in Los Angeles, and this is Take Fountain.
On today's video, we're going to be talking about bad advice that actors get from usually well-meaning individuals in their lives, whether those are other actors,
Absolutely,
teachers, your weird uncle at Christmas.
Everyone seems to have an opinion about this industry in a way that people don't about other jobs, right? So
That's right, yeah.
We definitely want to tackle that. Dispel some myths around some of the advice that you may get, and hope that this helps you in those situations.
Yeah, I think the key early on is learning who to take advice from and who to ignore. And so we're going to give you some advice on bad advice.
One of the major first things that you will likely run into when you're starting your acting career is the friend who takes headshots. Now, we know that headshots can be expensive, but as we've said in a number of other videos, starting an acting business is like starting any other business, and you need to be prepared to make an investment in that business. There's always going to be startup costs, and one of the first startup costs is headshots. It really is the key that unlocks the door to everything else. We always advise clients, if they don't feel like they can quite yet afford a professional headshot photographer, it's better to wait until you can afford that and save up for a few months, as opposed to taking the headshots with the friend and then having to replace them a few months later anyway. You're actually spending more money in that scenario than if you had just waited. A good headshot photographer entry level is going to run you in Los Angeles somewhere between $375 and $400 for the session. And then you'll want to budget a little bit to put those shots up onto Actors Access, casting networks, and potentially get a little bit of retouching done. So you probably want to budget around $500 to $600 for that first set of headshots. Again, it unlocks everything. This is the first investment you're going to make in your career. And a professional headshot photographer not only knows how to properly frame you specifically for headshots, they know how to properly light you for headshots, and they know the framing that actually works with the thumbnails on those two casting services I just mentioned. A lot of times what we run into with headshots that are from the friend who takes headshots is that the lighting just doesn't quite pop, or the framing isn't correct, and so then you will have a problem when you're trying to upload those to the casting sites.
One piece of bad advice I would love to chat about is fake credits. Now, that can be fake credits on IMDb, which a lot of people get an IMDb Pro account, and then they kind of go on and start to either create something that never really existed, or they try to put a credit onto an existing project. That's a little less common than it used to be. It used to be much easier to do. But yeah, so trying to hornswoggle people into thinking that you've had all this additional experience. More common in my experience is people who actually put on the physical resume either fake credits, fake projects, or trying to expand the role that they actually had. A lot of times we'll see series regular on something that they were definitely not a series regular on, or on a series that was not really a series.
Sure.
And so you just want to be careful that sometimes there is say a web series and you were a series regular, and that's true. But for the most part, these are easy to look up. It's easy to check and see. The person who gets that resume may be a person who worked on that project, or a person who knows that project intimately. You don't have to apologize for where you're at in your career. You can just use the resume to present yourself as you are now, with the understanding that your resume will improve. Sometimes when I'm pitching, I will use the phrase, resume hasn't caught up to the talent yet. That's okay. You don't have to invent things, and it's really going to put you in a bad light if you do get caught, which you will eventually get caught.
Another piece of advice that actors may be given that we don't necessarily think is the best advice is that if you have graduated from a BFA or a BA program where you've specifically focused on acting or film and television theater, that you don't need any more training post-college. That simply isn't true. Most actors, professional actors, get ongoing training and coaching throughout their careers. It will change over time. You may go from, scene study, which is what you've mostly probably been doing in college, to when you get out, now we're saying don't do more scene study. You actually, the nuance of this is that you probably don't need any more scene study training. And it can feel a little bit like a warm hug to go into a scene study class once you're out of school. So for anyone in this situation, we recommend doing the things that you haven't done in school, taking an on-camera class if you are a theater major, taking a commercial class, taking a class that's focused specifically on auditioning, taking a class that in stunts for the camera, something that is going to continue your education, but broaden the scope of what you've already learned. You will always need training. You will likely always need coaching. Very famous A-list actors receive coaching all the way through their careers. And so the idea that you're done when you're done with school is a bit of a myth.
Staying in the same class too long or staying with one coach for too long is also bad advice that people get. I hear all the time people telling actors, like, find the school that you like or find the studio that you like and stick with that and like keep working that one muscle. I find that is pretty bad advice. For number one, you never want to be the best person in your class. You want to constantly be seeking out opportunities to learn. And if you're not being pushed, if you're not being challenged, then you're not learning, quite honestly. It's like when you go to the gym, if you just train one muscle and you don't train it any harder or with any variety, then you're not really pushing yourself and you're not really going to grow. So I think it's the same holds true of acting or of any real skill. You want to make sure that not only are you pushing yourself by being around people who are better than you, but also just that you're trying different techniques. Because here's the other thing: when you're on set and it's take 13 and you just can't quite nail it, you need a lot of tools in your tool chest, if you will. So I think having different techniques and different styles to fall back on when necessary is also really important.
Absolutely. I think the one minor exception to that is you may find a coach that really just always pushes you, that you're a little intimidated by, or perhaps just you have that rapport where you just want to perform for them and they get the best out of you. That kind of person is okay to obviously keep for quite some time. Class is also a networking opportunity. So expanding the number of classes and people that you meet is really important as well. Another thing that we do not recommend is putting background gigs on your resume. Now, background work is fantastic. It's an amazing way to get on set. It's an amazing way to understand how a set works and understand the politics of set. It's great to just, meet other actors when you're first moving to a big market, be it LA or New York or Atlanta. However, if you put those jobs on your resume, it will likely preclude you from booking that show again, where if you don't, and the casting office, you weren't prominently featured in some way as background, you possibly could book that in a speaking role in the future.
Yeah, and even like on a film, like you just don't want people to think of you as a background actor.
That's the other side of it too.
So I think just showing like this is and it's not the same skill set either. Right. So you're not really showing off anything other than I've been on a set. And that's okay at the very beginning. But once you have like real professional acting credits, I think that background should move off very, very quickly. The next piece of advice I see a lot of actors get is to work on shorts, which is fine, but then to work on more shorts and more shorts and more shorts and do the student films and do all of this. And the fact is, at some point, if a short film doesn't really speak to you artistically, I think you should start saying no much earlier than a lot of people, I think, want to. And there are a few reasons for this. Number one is, again, we don't necessarily want people to think of you as a person who only does short films or who doesn't work on larger projects. But in addition to that, I think there's this idea of like, if you're competing in a smaller pool, if you're the big fish in a small pond, I think that it can become comfortable. And so to challenge yourself, to push yourself, I think getting off of those sets sometimes is really important. We see that on the theater side also, where maybe someone grew up in a smaller market and you can work constantly there. The offers just come to you, and it's very tempting to just say, yes, it feels good to get offered work, but at what cost?
Right.
And if you're not available, if you're, you aren't putting yourself in front of the people who are working on larger projects, I think it can become detrimental. I think the same thing with short films. I think that they're super useful. I think especially if artistically they speak to you, I think it's great. But I think it's an easy way to feel busy without it's like a treadmill, right? You're doing a lot of work, but you're not moving forward.
Right. And oftentimes they don't pay that well or pay at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, to your point, at some point, the shorts work should become really a footage play. Is there a piece of footage? Is this a character that you can play and that you just don't have footage for? That would be a reason to do a short sort of after you've built up a bit of a resume. Your point about the big fish in the small pond, I think, of course, it depends on your goals. If you are completely happy, in that small market doing that regional theater and, that's totally fine. But if you have larger goals, like you said, the no's sort of start to become as important as the yeses.
Yeah, I've always said I think that the most powerful tool an actor has is saying no and meaning it. I think that's really the only way to move anything forward in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's kind of the when one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah, you got to nail it shut. Say it, no one can get in. Yeah.
The idea of using a paid service to query agents and managers. There are a number of these out there. One of the things that they sell is that you can kind of personalize these emails, which just means that my name or Anthony's name will end up in the salutation. But the rest of the email looks like every other email coming from that service, from every other actor that is using that service. And so really what's happening there is the person that or the people that started that service are surely making a lot of money off of actors who are signing up for it. They may find some success. I'm sure these wouldn't be around if some people didn't get signed this way. But for the most part, most agencies and management companies get to the point where when we see that these are coming from these services, and especially if I hover over links and see that those links are being tracked so that it kicks a message to that service that I've opened the email or I've read the email, that personally kind of creeps me out.
Yeah.
I feel like someone's in my inbox.
That's an enormous red flag.
Yeah.
I hate links tracking
links. Yeah. So I will hover over to see if it's tracked, and then I know it's probably from one of these services. And for the most part, I am deleting that email.
Okay.
Now, we get so many of these, I'm not actually remembering anyone that has done that. So if you're a little scared because you've done that in the past and you want to, I would say try resubmitting just on your own in the way that that agency or management company has already made public how they want to be submitted. So sometimes it's through the website, sometimes they're okay with email queries, but they may have a specific email address that they want queried. That's another indication that it's coming from a service, is that it's not following that instruction. So it's a waste of your money. You're probably helping someone else who is maybe an out-of-work actor support themselves. And, no shade on anyone who's trying to make a living while they're pursuing an acting career. But I think some of these services for actors, where actors have to pay to do things that you could do for free, we just recommend to be very careful.
It's just very spammy and very, we didn't ask to be signed up for this. Now you may not care, and that's a choice you can make, but for me anyway, I think just doing market research and coming up with your own email, that shows off you very well is just a much more effective use of your time, and it's a whole heck of a lot cheaper. I got an email a couple of weeks ago, and it had a link to this actor's access profile. And I open it up and I see an Atlanta agent and a New York agent and a New Mexico agent and a Los Angeles agent and a Chicago agent. And I think there was a Louisiana agent. There were so many agents all listed on this person's Actors Access profile. And I thought, clearly, someone told this actor, get representation in every market. You can be a local hire anywhere. It's just a plane ride away. I think that that's particularly bad advice.
Agreed.
Not least because when I open that and I see that, I don't know where I fit in. It feels like you're never going to be available in my market. It also feels a little desperate, honestly. It feels a little bit like you are really just eager to take any kind of work. And if we're trying to build a career, if we're trying to build, a business that makes an impact, I think chasing small things like that starts to be sort of not a good look. That's just me personally. In addition to that, I wonder, can you truly work in all of these markets? Right. Can you truly keep all of these reps happy? This idea came out that like, well, you can, everything's self-tape anyway, so you can work as a local everywhere. Really, when push comes to shove, I think a lot of markets are pushing back because actors are bailing at the last minute when they see the price of flights. They're not reliable in any one market. I just really personally see much more return on investment when people focus on one or two markets. So I think finding those two markets where one or two markets where you can really dig in and really try to build something in those markets rather than, chasing every like co-star that you can find, no matter where in the country, even if you're losing money on every booking, once, flights and commissions and hotel rooms are taken care of. I just think you're better than that. You don't need to do that. I don't think that it puts across a very professional look for your package for most people. Listen, you might be in a situation where you truly can be a local in 5 different markets. I would still probably encourage you to focus on 1 or 2 just because, if you're really trying to be all things at all times, how good can you be at any one thing? I think really devoting your energy and your resources to building a career in 1 or 2 markets pays dividends in the long run.
Remember, we talk a lot about how this is a relationship business. So the idea that you can build a relationship with that many agents and then have them want to cross work together. Most of the time when people have agents in 2 markets, those agents are aware of each other and they're trading information about where they're pitching or what, and there's actually a division of labor there and everyone's on the same page. As a note, if you have moved quite a bit and you've simply forgotten to take down agencies that you used to be repped by in your Actors Access, they do show up for us when you send your information over. And I always get scared if I see another management company in there when someone submits to me. I usually hold off because none of us like to poach. So, it could be that you've just forgotten to remove them from your Actors Access after you've parted ways, and make sure you take that step before you start reaching out about new representation.
I would add to that, that's very similar. When you send out your resume, don't send out your agent's resume with the logo on it. That's not even bad advice. Yeah. That's just like, just don't do that. Yeah. First of all, it might not even have your personal contact, but also like, I can see that you're with XYZ agency. It doesn't, none of us, well, not none of us, most of us don't like to poach clients from one another.
Exactly. But I think quite often people assume that, the best day job, support job to have is working in food service. And there's a long history of actors, of course, that started in the restaurant business. I would say that with the way that sort of food culture has exploded over the last 20 years with the Food Network and people sort of being much more demanding about going out and the fact that it's gotten so much more expensive, restaurants really have, for the most part, moved into demanding a high level of service from their wait staff. And I worked in food service for a while, and I know I had a lot of actors on my staff, and it can be a really hard thing to manage when you're working, usually a night shift from 4 to 10, 11, 12 at night. Quite often there's pressure to hang out with staff after your shift. You're very tired the next day. And so getting in the gym, doing the things you need to do for your acting business and get those self-tapes in, I think it just can be a lot to handle, especially if you're not at one of those restaurants where you can just work Friday, Saturday, Sunday and kind of make all your money for the week. If it's something that you really truly feel like you can balance and you're strict about, you know, not going out for that shift drink and spending your money that you've just earned on that and, you know, putting it back into your business instead so that you can afford those headshots, of course, we wouldn't want to pick on any one specific job, but especially in LA and New York, I think it can just be a hard industry to pair with acting.
When I watch The Bear, I always wonder, like, those hours are insane. Like, they're there in the morning.
Yeah.
They're there for the entire evening service. I've never worked in a restaurant. I take that back. I worked in a restaurant for one day. I couldn't do it. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there are lots of jobs, especially in the gig work economy now. There are a lot of extremely flexible jobs. So I would say if you're looking to do something that's going to put you in contact with people up close and personal, I think a lot of the gig works, the Postmates, the Ubers, those kinds of things are maybe a bit better than the restaurant industry. But really, like, do your research, because most actors I meet these days actually have kind of interesting jobs that are funding their careers. So something to think about. One piece of advice that I hear all the time, or one source of advice that I hear all the time is, well, my friend says, or my new favorite, well, my friend's agent says. Every career is a bit different. Whatever your friend is dealing with, whatever your friend's agent is dealing with is probably completely different than your scenario, than your situation. And that agent or that manager isn't in the day-to-day of working with your business. If you have a team that you have entrusted with your career and they are giving you advice and you watch one of our videos, you're like, well, you know, Anthony and Jess say, I think that that's bad advice, honestly. Like, I think you can take it into consideration, but at the end of the day, like, you've entrusted this team to give you advice and to help you build and manage your career. Looking outside of that relationship and pulling in advice that's meant for a different business entirely. It's like, for instance, if you work at Little Caesars and you have a friend who works at Papa John's, what they're doing on a night-to-night basis, it looks very similar to what you're doing, but they have different clientele, they have different procedures, they have different things going on. So it's just like any other business where you can take it into consideration, but I would not operate on that advice, especially if it goes contrary to your advisors, to the team that you have built to help you build this career.
And I want to double down on something that you said, which is that if there's anything in any of these videos that we say that contradicts something that your team is saying, listen to your team. Yeah. Again, we're trying to give the most general principles that we know have worked for our clients over time, but part of the reason why you're with your specific team is because you trust them. You've built a relationship with them. And I think sometimes when we hear the but my friend or but my friend's agent, it actually kind of pushes on that trust that we've built a bit. And it's, you know, it's a human nature to kind of, for us, when we hear that, to say, well, wait a minute, like, do they not trust me anymore? So just be mindful of that too if you're bringing that up. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't find another way of asking the question. I was thinking about this. What do you think about it, right? It may be very well that your agent or manager agrees with something you've heard, but it's the way that you present it.
I would also say we're going to put this video out on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, everything will be different. So, like, things move fast, things change. So again, just because we said something in a video doesn't mean by the time it comes up for you that it's 100% relevant.
That's true. That's true. And that goes back to what we said at the top, which is the biggest thing we want everyone to take from this is over time learning how to and where to get advice from and what trusted sources mean to you. Another thing that I think actors hear all the time is this: say yes to everything. Say yes to every job. And this, we were kind of talking about this before with the shorts. That's just not feasible, A. And B, it doesn't really allow you to be strategic. We really look for clients, and I think most agents and managers look for clients that are in this for the long haul. And so have some kind of strategy behind the kinds of work that they want to be doing, the things that turn them on artistically. And so if you're just kind of saying yes to everything, it doesn't really help you to have a comedy short credit and then a co-star in a Ryan Murphy drama and then, go do a play and then go, act as a cinematographer on someone else's project that takes you away for a month. Be careful about what you say yes to. It's still your time, it's still your energy, and it's still your artistic effort. And you want to make sure that it's of quality. It can be hard to know what is a quality project and what isn't a quality project. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, if something looks a little weird, if the description is a little funky, even if the part's right for you, trust that instinct and probably either don't submit to it, or if you do submit and then the person reaching out is just making you not feel super comfortable, don't be afraid to turn that down.
Yeah, you don't need to be exploited. You don't need to be abused. I was literally just talking with an agent in my office today. There was an independent film producer who refused to give out a script, but then refused to said that they could only read the script in their presence. And just everything started to be very red flaggy. And at some point I'm like, at what point do you even want to be on that set? Because it's all going to be like this. So watch for those red flags and don't be afraid to say no. It's like we said, that's kind of your only power, is saying no and meaning it. A couple of years ago, I thought maybe I'd gotten into some ruts, right? Maybe I'd gotten a little comfortable in my routine. So I was like, if anyone invites me to see something, I'm going to say yes. Mm-hmm. The very first day after I decided that, I got an invitation to a film screening, a feature film screening. And normally I would have avoided this at all costs, but I was like, no, I said I would say yes to everything. So I RSVP, I go to this screening. It's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. I instantly regretted saying yes to everything. You never have to say yes to everything. Trust your instincts. You can be a little more open-minded.
Sure.
You can be like, well, maybe this is a person I'd like to know, or this is a project I'd like to work on if they can meet my terms, something like that. So, it's okay to say no. And in fact, it's encouraged.
And to your point about, you have to come and read the script in my presence. I find that a big red flag is often people who are at the beginning of their careers. This happens more in film than TV.
Oh, yeah.
That are emulating something that they've heard a major director does.
This particular director referenced Quentin Tarantino.
I was just going to say, that's a Quentin Tarantino thing.
Yeah.
The reason why Quentin Tarantino demands that people come and read his latest script is because a couple of movies ago, his script was leaked on the internet and he did not get to make that movie.
Right.
Or he decided not to make that movie after he had put all this time in. So, Quentin has earned the right to demand that people come read the script in his presence, both from a career perspective and from the fact that he got seriously burned. Someone that's just out of film school that is, presenting their film with their name above the title and demanding that you come to their house to read their script, that's probably a red flag.
If they start to get a little big for their britches, I'm not saying it's always a red flag, but personally speaking, I think I would ask questions.
Yeah.
One other piece of advice, and we talk about this all the time on this channel, is people who believe that all you need to focus on is your acting, right? All you need to do is focus on creating the best acting product you can and let your team handle the rest. And that's particularly bad advice because, again, you're building a business. We talk about this a lot. Networking is fundamental to building a business. Advertising, getting out, creating leads, meeting people, knowing what's going on. There's so much about this industry that really relies on people, or really on any industry, or at least almost any industry, that relies on just being actively engaged. And I actually find there are agencies that ask actors not to take a driver's seat in their own careers. And frequently those actors then, will years later when it goes sour with that, when the relationship with that agent goes sour, they'll find their way to us, and in our meeting we're talking, and it's very clear that they don't know what's going on in their careers. They don't know how to drive it anymore. They don't really understand. They don't know who they know. They don't know who their fans are because they've never worried about any of that stuff. Now, I'm not saying you need to keep like detailed spreadsheets. Right. I think it's great if you do, but a lot of people don't operate that way. But you should not just sit back and wait for the phone to ring. Right. It's so hard to stay engaged in your own career when you only flip the switch when there's an audition. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really hard to feel connected to the industry. I think it's really easy to kind of get burned out that way too, where you just feel like, you're not really connected in the same way.
I think people think, I've got an agent, I've got a manager, I can just sit back and let them drive. And unfortunately, your agent's making 10%, your manager's making 10 to 15%. Mathematically, that just doesn't work out. It just means that you still have to be putting 80% of the work in, and finding work for yourself amongst your network needs to be part of that 80%. You need to be bringing work to your agents and managers while they are running down the road of going through casting, but you need to be making those relationships with producers, directors, writer friends, and working that network and bringing opportunities to your team as well. Another piece of advice that we don't necessarily agree with is the idea that you must go to drama school in order to have a productive career. In quite a few cases, the actual opposite is true of that. Right. So if you look at the trajectories of many high-profile actors and actresses, they probably never attended a 4-year school. And they may have attended a 4-year school, and they may not have attended a 4-year school to study acting. Right. We have nothing against these programs, and there are tons of people who do attend those programs and do have very successful careers. The key to this is, and now my alma mater is going to be very mad at me. Oh, yeah. But the key to this is that most of these programs will tell you not to have representation while you're in school, and they will tell you not to audition, that you can wait until you've graduated, just focused on your craft while you're in school. That is another piece of advice we absolutely do not agree with. The time between your 18 and 22 is some of the most valuable time in your career, from the perspective of that is when quite a few people tend to break out. There tend to be an outsized number of possible roles in that age range. And if you just go to school and turn that potential of working off while you're in school, you are now competing when you get out with someone who didn't make the same choice and maybe is on their second agent. They've already booked their first guest star. They have set experience that you don't have. So it is one of the few careers that's left, I think, that really doesn't require a college degree. Moving to New York or LA, spending the money that you would have spent going to one of those programs, so, living in those cities, taking local acting classes that are plugged into the casting networks that you would be taking when you come out of school anyway, and do some community college classes, take some business classes, just so that you are in the mix with other people your age and getting a little bit of that college experience, focusing on working in whatever way you can while you are in school. I went to UCLA as a theater major over 20 years ago. I will tell you that the people that ignored the department are still working today.
Yeah, we want to be careful and say that that's not for everyone.
Absolutely.
Some people really do well by having that 4-year degree you mentioned earlier. A lot, especially many of these programs have great placement. They, you walk out with a good network, with a support system, but it's something to think about. Would I be better off spending this 4 years in a large market or even a mid-market, spending this money on professional acting classes and putting money into my business, or would I be better off spending this money and this time on a degree? Yeah, the advice that like you have to go to college, I think is actually in many fields terrible advice. I think that's sort of advice in general that is bad, but especially I think in the arts and particularly in acting, where like you mentioned, 17 to 22 is really a time to kind of put your foot on the gas for a lot of people.
Unfortunately, the way this system is set up is that most acting programs are connected to theater programs in universities. Most film schools came along so much later that they don't have acting programs. And so a lot of people who want to eventually work on camera are actually getting theater-based training. And so then are not spending any time exploring anything on camera while they're in school. And so that's kind of what we mean by ignoring your department. If ultimately you want to be in film and TV, go to a theater school in LA or in Atlanta. If you want to do theater, plan on being in New York for school or somewhere near New York or somewhere where there's really good regional theaters, or moving there quickly thereafter when you have your degree so that you can just jump right into it.
I think that's a good idea for a future episode. Something about where if you are in a traditional sort of acting program that doesn't offer a lot of on-camera opportunities, because a lot of film schools don't, film departments.
There's no crossover.
Yeah, there's no crossover. I think that's a good idea for, let's think about at a future episode where we talk about how to make the best of that situation.
Yeah.
One thing that I've heard a number of people say recently while putting together their reels is, I need to do another project, or I need to do another project, or they just want to get a lot of quantity. And I think really that's bad advice. I think for most people, really focusing on a handful of really good projects that show you off very well is much more beneficial.
Absolutely.
For building a reel and just for having footage in general, I think when you have a reel that's full of like 15 one-line scenes, it doesn't really tell us a lot. This is meant to show you off, show off your acting skills. So I think I like to have just 2 or 3 scenes that really give they show good work for the actors, show them listening, show some kind of an arc. I would much rather have that than like 15 short clips with a quippy one-liner or something like that. Quality over quantity, rather than the advice that I keep hearing people get, which is to have a lot of variety.
These days, a reel with 2 or 3 really good scenes plus a couple of self-tapes absolutely works for submitting to agents and management companies. And we absolutely can use a really high quality self-tape to pitch. So just don't feel that pressure. We do not advise is to change your look to match whatever is in right now.
No.
I had a client once that they sort of had, a bob haircut, and they decided to go really, really, really short with a pixie cut. And their commercial agent was not happy about this, because it completely changed their commercial category. If they were going to make this change, it needed to be kind of for good, right? Or for an extended amount of time. And the reason for that is your look does change things. It can sometimes change your casting category, like it did with this client. Now, they wanted to kind of transition out of focusing on their commercial career and transition more into theatrical, and they felt like this would accomplish that, and it did. And so it was the right choice for them. I had another client that he didn't get an opportunity to cut his hair during COVID, and his hair grew out really long, and we realized it kind of put him into this whole other category, and we got new headshots to just kind of test it out before he cut his hair again, and he started auditioning and booking like crazy.
I have the opposite of that story. I have a client who went through chemo and had to shave her head, has never worked more.
Changing your look can be a great thing, but changing it every 6 months because now you want to be a redhead or you want to cut all your hair off, not only is it going to be incredibly expensive, it actually will confuse casting. And I have had other people who have gone down that road, and they so drastically changed their look that it was basically like they had to be reintroduced to casting all over again. And they saw their auditions drop for like 6 months until casting figured out that this was the same person. So talk it over with your team. And in general, you want to minimize the amount of time you're spending kind of chasing trends.
Now, sometimes your look will change.
Sure.
Will happen. For instance, I have a client who lost 150 pounds, which is great, never healthier. This actor used to be a series regular. But I had to do exactly what you said. We had to reintroduce him to casting.
Yeah.
And that's a lengthy process. It takes time. And so if you're constantly sort of shifting up how you look, just know that it not only can be confusing, but it can take time off of moving forward in your career. Mm-hmm. Trying to be a blank slate so that you can be cast as anything, right? There's this idea, and I do believe to some degree that a well-trained actor can do many things that people won't necessarily type them as. However, that's going to be later in your career that you're really starting to have those opportunities and really that people are going to trust you to do that. At the beginning of your career, I'm not saying you need to get hyper focused and super drill in on like one specific thing, but I think trying to be all things at once makes it really hard to excel at any one thing. And so trying to be a blank slate visually, in addition to sort of like trying to be a blank slate as an actor, one thing that I sort of hit on recently is this idea of like, whoever your favorite actor is, I bet there are people who do an impression of them. Mm-hmm. And what is that impression of you? What is an impression of you? And the reason that you can do an impression of someone is because there's something distinctive about them that you couldn't just hire anyone off the street. So if you're a blank slate, even Meryl Streep is not a blank slate. Like she's won, Academy Awards. She can play anything. She really can play anything.
Absolutely.
But like Meryl Streep is a distinctive person with a unique point of view and isn't trying to be a blank slate.
Right.
And so if you are better than Meryl Streep, I'm going to put my email. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, it's something to think about. Like, I think a lot of people tell actors, you want to be able to do everything. And I think that to a degree, yes. However, you want to be able to do your version of everything.
Sure.
And I think that that's much different. And I also think, especially early in your career, really focus and drill down on the things that make you unique and that make you the way that you tell stories specific to you.
The last piece of bad advice that we want to cover is the idea that you just wait around for your big break. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is the most collaborative business in the world. Theater, film, television, they all require collaboration. And unfortunately, you just can't sit around assuming that the opportunities to collaborate are just going to magically appear. You have to create your own momentum, and you have to continue to generate that momentum all throughout your career. One of my favorite interviews I remember watching with Kevin Bacon, and it has stuck with me ever since. Even someone of Kevin Bacon's caliber, who has 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? And has worked on comedies and dramas and TV and film. Every time I finish a job, I am an out-of-work actor. And so that is his reminder to himself that he may take a vacation, he may take a week off, whatever that is, but then he has to get back out there and drum up that next job and go out and see who his collaborators are, who is in his network, who's got that next piece of work for him.
Does that mean that once this episode airs, I can be in 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? Does he get a credit on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Kevin, come on the show.
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, come on in. Thank you so much for joining us. If you got value out of this, please click thumbs up, click subscribe, and that notification bell. That way you get alerted every time we have a new episode. Again, I'm Anthony Boyer.
I'm Jess Canty.
And this has been Take Fountain.